The dissection of the penitentiary car provided Arthur Sterling with the how. Now he needed the who, and more importantly, the where of the missing $30 million. The trail led him immediately to Gideon Pike, the brilliant but mercurial former master mechanic for the Northern Central Railway. Profile of a mastermind. Gideon Pike was not a common criminal. He was a mechanical savant who possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of locomotive construction and track logistics. He had worked on the very maintenance contracts for the Union Express Company's specialized cars, giving him the blueprint access and the opportunity to install the seamless Dropbox floor long before the gold was loaded. His firing from the railway 6 months prior, due to what his superiors termed extreme insolence and unauthorized expensive mechanical modifications, provided a potent revenge motive. Sterling dispatched teams of Pinkertons along the Northern Central Line, instructing them to prioritize the following: any suspicious large-scale purchases of specialized rope, iron sheeting, or high-grade tools within a 50-mile radius of Lockhaven. Unusual movements of personnel or equipment near the Susquehanna River and its tributaries, particularly the remote Syndicate Creek that flowed past Dents Run. Recent movements of Pike's family or known associates. The Dents Run investigation. Sterling himself, accompanied by Captain Vance, who was desperate to redeem his reputation, journeyed back to the desolate clearing at Dents Run. The ground investigation was hampered by 3 days of heavy rain, but the location itself was the crucial clue. The railway line at Dents Run ran adjacent to a steep wooded incline on one side and a shallow rocky tributary stream on the other. This stream, which fed the larger Syndicate Creek, was the very river the gold had used. Sterling observed the terrain. The drop box was only 4 feet square. 8 tons of gold, nearly 16,000 pounds, would have been in dozens of crates. They had 20 minutes. They couldn't have carried it all up that incline, nor could they have loaded it onto a standard wagon train. He pointed to the stream. The water carried it. The team began dragging the creek bed, focusing on the immediate downstream area. Within hours, they found the first tangible evidence of the heist. A broken, waterlogged length of high-grade hemp rope, cut cleanly with a sharp blade, snagged on a submerged log. 3 distinctive iron spikes of a type not used by the Northern Central Railway scattered in the mud, suggesting they were used to anchor a temporary structure. A fragment of specialized wooden crating painted with a pale green stripe, the exact color used to identify the high-value gold shipments from the San Francisco Mint. This confirmed the drop and float theory. The thieves had constructed a temporary dam or weir to deepen the stream slightly at the drop site, enabling them to load the heavy crates onto specially built low-draft river craft, likely flatboats or broad, heavy rafts, during the brief 20-minute window. The gold was not buried at Dents Run. It was taken from Dents Run and moved downriver, deeper into the Pennsylvania wilderness. Following the river. The search extended down the Syndicate Creek to its confluence with the larger Susquehanna River, an area notorious for its thick, impassable forests and isolated logging camps, perfect places to conceal a large operation. The breakthrough came from a Pinkerton agent embedded in the local lumber trade. He reported a highly unusual and expensive purchase made 2 months ago. Pike had bought a tract of nearly 50 acres of remote, abandoned logging land deep in Cameron County, far from any established road. Pike had claimed he was going to extract the last remaining hardwood, but no logging activity had been reported. Sterling secured a warrant based on the physical evidence and the circumstantial case against Pike, and led a detachment of 20 Pinkertons and a company of cavalry toward the isolated tract. The land was a labyrinth of steep ravines and dense pine forest, accessible only by a single, winding deer trail. Following the creek for 2 days, they reached Pike's isolated makeshift camp. The camp was deserted. There were signs of recent activity: a cold fire pit, carelessly discarded tins of canned peaches, and the fresh scent of coal smoke. But Pike and his crew were long gone. But the camp held the key to the gold's immediate fate. Hidden beneath a hastily camouflaged canvas tarp, Sterling's men discovered a large, steam-powered centrifugal pump and several coils of thick canvas hose. This was equipment not designed for logging, but for draining a pond or excavation site. Following the hose from the pump, they discovered a small, natural ravine that had been expertly dammed. The pump had been used to drain the water, creating a muddy 6-foot-deep pit. And there, gleaming faintly under the thin layer of mud and pine needles, were the crates. Crate number 17, crate number 3, crate number 25. Roughly 1/3 of the $30 million shipment, meticulously packaged and sealed, was resting in the bottom of that drained ravine. The thieves had moved the gold downriver, temporarily cached it in this massive waterproof pit, and were awaiting the means to transport it further south. Sterling secured the cash. However, the discovery also provided a chilling confirmation. Pike and his crew had been interrupted. They had intended to move all 8 tons, but the speed of Sterling's investigation had forced them to abandon the bulk and flee with what they could carry. Captain Vance's relief was palpable, but Sterling remained grim. They didn't get caught because they were clumsy, Captain. They got caught because they were forced to rush. They still have 2/3 of the gold, roughly $20 million, and they are now forewarned. They will not repeat their mistake. The hunt for Gideon Pike and the rest of the Union's missing fortune intensified, leading Sterling to suspect a higher, perhaps Confederate-backed motive was driving this impossible, perfectly executed crime. The mechanic had been the hand. The question remained, who was the head?
The recovery of 1/3 of the gold provided the Union Treasury with a desperately needed respite, but the fact that $20 million remained missing, along with the mastermind Gideon Pike, turned the pursuit into a national priority. Arthur Sterling understood that Pike, a man motivated by revenge and profit, would not risk the incredible engineering required for the heist just to bury the gold locally and wait. He needed to monetize it. The fugitive's trajectory. Sterling theorized that Pike was attempting to use the gold as a high-value bargaining chip with the Confederacy. The Union gold, melted down and recast, could pay for blockade runners, European arms, and critically stabilize the Confederate dollar, which was plummeting in value. The trail led south and west, along the rugged, winding paths that mirrored the geography of the Civil War's Western Front in Pennsylvania. The Pinkerton strategy shifted. Instead of searching every creek bed, they focused on the human networks that could support a fugitive carrying tons of metal. Sterling's intelligence network uncovered 2 crucial pieces of information. The wagon train. Local farmers reported seeing an unusually large, heavily guarded wagon train moving south from Cameron County days after the Dents Run robbery. The wagons, covered in tarps, were traveling only at night and moving with extreme caution. The safe house. Pike's older brother, a known Confederate sympathizer and horse breeder named Ezra Pike, operated a remote farm near the border of West Virginia, a known conduit for smugglers and Southern spies. Sterling calculated Pike's likely route: move the gold from the creek caches by wagon train, utilizing hidden logging roads, and make a final desperate dash for the relative safety of Ezra Pike's remote farm. From there, the gold could be smuggled across the border or even transferred to a Confederate agent. The interception at Pike's Crossing. Sterling and Captain Vance led a combined force of Pinkertons and Union cavalry. The pursuit lasted 2 grueling weeks through rain, mud, and dense forest, culminating in the remote foothills of the Alleghenies near the West Virginia line. They intercepted the wagon train just before dawn at a hidden logging clearway known as Pike's Crossing. The ensuing confrontation was brief and brutal. Pike's crew was a small, hardened band of 5, clearly professional mercenaries rather than railroad workers. They were well-armed and fought with the desperation of men guarding a kingdom's ransom. Pike himself was not among them, having clearly separated from the transport team earlier. The cavalry quickly subdued the guards. Sterling and Vance rushed the remaining wagons. The tarps were pulled back to reveal the remaining $20 million. The gold was no longer in Union Mint crates. It had been painstakingly removed, melted down on site in makeshift forges in the woods, and recast into 50-pound iron ingots designed to look like routine wagon counterweights or raw smelting material. This audacious move was designed to allow the gold to pass through checkpoints without raising suspicion. A brilliant operational detail that spoke volumes about Pike's meticulous planning. The gold was recovered. The Great Gold Rush heist was, in terms of material loss, solved. However, Pike, the mastermind, remained at large. The revelation, the head of the snake. The interrogation of the captured crew yielded little until Sterling employed a subtle pressure point, the mention of the inscription left on the penitentiary car. The mercenaries, hardened as they were, had been unaware of the poetic message, only knowing they were hired to move heavy metal. One of them, however, finally broke under the realization that he was involved in a vast political conspiracy rather than just a robbery. Pike didn't write that, the mercenary mumbled, shivering. He only took the job. The man who paid for the car, the plans, and the whole idea, he was the one who talked like a damn poet. Who? Sterling demanded. He was only ever called the treasurer, the man choked out. But Pike said he was no Confederate spy. He was an officer, Union brash. The crew member provided a final, staggering detail. A small, personalized signet ring that the man known as the treasurer had once dropped at their camp. It was a heavy gold band, engraved with the initials V.A. and a small stylized eagle. Sterling pulled Captain Vance aside, his voice barely a whisper. Vance, who had spent the last 2 weeks desperately trying to restore his honor, looked utterly bewildered. "Captain," Sterling said, producing the signet ring, "I have just recovered $20 million of your gold. Now I must ask you to look at this ring. Does this mean anything to you?" Vance took the ring, his hands trembling. He turned it over and over, his face draining of color. The small, stylized eagle was the official crest of the Vance family, a line of wealthy Virginia landowners who had moved north before the war. The initials V.A. stood for Vance, Elias. Captain Elias Vance, the architect of the security, the keeper of the first key, and the man who ordered the fateful stop at Dents Run, was the treasurer. The pieces of the impossible puzzle snapped into place with horrifying clarity. The blueprint. Vance had designed the penitentiary car itself, ensuring the Dropbox access was incorporated into the original plans, hidden from all but a few trusted engineers, like Pike. The key. Vance held one of the 2 keys, ensuring no suspicion would fall on a forcible entry. The route. Vance had insisted on the seemingly minor, unscheduled Dents Run stop, a remote, perfect staging ground for the extraction. The inscription. Vance, a man of education and aristocratic pride, had penned the poetic message as an act of calculated vanity, ensuring he alone would understand the subtle mockery of his former employers. Vance was not simply a thief. He was a disillusioned Southern sympathizer who had been placed in a position of ultimate trust. His family's Virginia lands had been seized by the Union. The Great Gold Rush heist was not just an act of robbery, but a sophisticated act of economic warfare intended to cripple the Union war effort by delivering the entire $30 million fortune to the Confederacy. Vance's partnership with Pike was genius. Pike had the mechanical skill to execute the theft, and Vance had the access, the key, and the authority to ensure it would undetected until it was too late. Sterling moved immediately, quietly ordering the cavalry to surround Vance, who was still staring at the signet ring in his hand. "Captain Vance," Sterling said, his voice hard, "you are under arrest for treason against the United States. Where is Gideon Pike?" Vance did not fight. He simply looked up, a ghost of a defiant smile on his face, a man who had pulled off a truly impossible crime, even if his fate was sealed by the recovery of the gold. "Pike," he whispered, looking past Sterling toward the rolling hills. "Pike is the greatest mechanic who ever lived. He owes me nothing now. He took his promised 10%, and he is long gone." The fate of Captain Elias Vance, the Union officer who masterminded the perfect inverted train heist, was sealed. He would be tried and executed for treason. The gold was recovered, the Union financial disaster averted, and the mystery of the ghost gold of 1863 was solved. Yet the final, most enduring question remained, seeding a century of legend. $3 million, Pike's 10% cut, was still missing. Pike, the brilliant rogue mechanic, vanished with his fortune, leaving behind only the legend of the greatest gold heist in American history and the whisper of a colossal hidden wealth still buried somewhere in the remote Pennsylvania wilderness.